Welcome to today's complimentary webinar, Extended Learning Audiences, Understanding the Changing Landscape for Learning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Erin Spencer and I'll be your moderator for our session. I would like to take this opportunity to tell you a little about Brandon Hall Group. Brandon Hall Group was established in 1992 and was formerly Brandon Hall Research. As you may know, we are a research and analyst advisor firm. We have nearly 200,000 subscribers to our services and over 10,000 clients globally. Brandon Hall Group focuses on the areas of learning and development, talent management, leadership development, and executive management. We also specialize in sales effectiveness and marketing impact. We have several offerings for our members, including our Research Member Center, our knowledge bases, a Smart Choice certification program, and our Excellence Awards program. I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Our first presenter is David Wentworth. Dave is a senior analyst here at Brandon Hall Group. Our second presenter is John Lay, the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Meridian. John is responsible for executive management and oversight of Meridian's global sales, marketing, and public relations. John brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise in prioritizing sales activities, navigating complex organizations and sales cycles, focusing on customer challenges, and creating impactful integrated solutions. I'd like to thank Meridian for sponsoring today's webinar. Meridian provides the industry-leading Meridian Global LMS and an array of supporting professional services custom designed to align to unique client needs. They are the #1 ranked human capital management company for customer loyalty with a documented customer retention rate of 98%. Their solutions empower organizations to optimize their learning technology business processes and drive breakthrough results. Before we begin, I would like to invite you as attendees to take an active role in today's presentation. There will be poll questions throughout today's webinar as well as a question and answer period near the close of our session. If you wish to ask a question during today's presentation, we would encourage you to do so. You may ask questions by typing in the question box of your control panel. I will be monitoring today's questions and will be providing some of your questions to today's presenters for their feedback as time permits. Also, all attendees will receive a copy of the slides and a recording of the presentation after the webinar. I will now turn today's platform over to Brandon Hall Group's Dave Wentworth, who will fill us in on today's agenda.
Well, thank you very much, Erin, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody, depending on where you are, and thanks for joining us today. And John and I would like to welcome you to today's session on extended learning audiences. Some of the things that we hope to go over today with you are we're going to first, identify the audience that we've got here today, so we have a good idea of who's on the webinar and who we might tailor our presentation to. And then what we want to do is walk through and define what we mean when we talk about the extended enterprise. I'm sure many folks on the line are familiar with the concept, but some may be taking their first steps down that road. So we want to sort of define that as far as what we mean when we talk about delivering learning to the extended enterprise. We're going to look at some of the market data that Brandon Hall has collected around this topic over the past year, and then as well as look at some of the top business priorities that are involved in how delivering learning to the extended learning audience can help meet those business priorities. And we're going to use some real-world examples in there to show you how some companies are achieving these priorities by delivering their learning outside the enterprise. And we're also going to look at the challenges that are involved with this sort of extended enterprise learning, and what we can do to sort of mitigate those and give you some discussion points around what to think about if you're thinking about heading down this road. And of course, we'll summarize and get to some questions that we maybe didn't get to during the actual presentation. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start. I want to go ahead and take a poll of the audience here and see what type of experience the folks on the line have with extended enterprise learning. So you can see the poll here, and if you would just go ahead and click your responses to what you think your particular level of experience is. And if you do want to select other, feel free to type into the chat box or the question box what you would consider your experience to be if you want to share that with us. And we'll take a look at some of those as well. So far, about half of the folks have voted, so we're just going to give a few more seconds here and see if we can't get everybody on board. 3/4. Anybody else want to join in before I go ahead and close and share our responses with everyone? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. And, oh, hang on one second. And I'm going to go ahead and share those responses with everyone. So hopefully everyone now can see the responses. And it seems like most of the folks on the line here are taking their first steps down the Extended Enterprise Road, John, with a handful right behind there saying that they're in that operations role that delivers, that does deliver training to an Extended Enterprise. So does that surprise you that this is the results, or is this sort of what you expected? People are just starting to get into this and want to find out what it's all about?
Yeah, this is what I expected. Part of one of the things we'll discuss later is the increasing role of operations in external enterprise initiatives, and really why that is in the industry, and how much we're seeing of that. So it's interesting to see that reflected in these numbers. I thought it'd be lower than that on the call today, but great.
Okay, so it gives us a good idea of who's on the call today. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next part here, where we talk about what the Extended Enterprise really is. And in reality, it's pretty simple. We're talking about those people that have that connection to your organization in one way or another, but who aren't actually your employees. So it seems pretty broad, and it is. It's a pretty wide category, and some may be surprised at just what kind of reach your organization does have outside of the enterprise. And so, let's take a look at what that means. Who are we talking about when we talk about these people who have an organization who are not employees? So very simply, you've got your organization, and inside that organization you've got your various corporate functions, and many of them are the same for various organizations, and then each organization has their own unique functions that are specific to their business. But inside, typically most organizations, you'll have at least some form of purchasing arm and some sort of sales arm. And why that's important is, while those things all live inside the enterprise, these purchasing functions, these sales functions, are actually windows to the extended enterprise, right? So you've got outside the organization, you've got manufacturers who in turn deliver materials to the suppliers, who put together whatever the products may be, if it's an organization that actually sells hard goods. And then you purchase these products, and that's how these things get into the organization. And so there's this supply chain on this end of things coming into the organization. And then on the other side, coming out of the sales function, is the other end of the supply chain, where it goes out to resellers or franchisees, and then eventually down to the customers. And so really, the extended enterprise is quite vast. And most organizations have a reach probably further than they might actually expect. And granted, this may look slightly different for a given industry or a given organization. There might be a few other steps in between, but in reality, there's always at least something coming in on the supply chain, and most definitely you've got that supply chain that heads out on the other side to those finally reaching those customers. And to give you another sort of visual on that and give you an idea of what we're talking about, so you've got your employees that are internal to the organization, right? And then you also have contractors. So they might not be employees, but they do work for you. So that's another level of employee that you may have that is attached to your enterprise. Then there are partners. Whatever those may be, whether they're supply chain partners or just other organizations where there's a symbiotic relationship where you help sell one another's products through a partnership. And then you have your different sales channels, the different ways that your products and services reach the market. And this is a really big section here, because there's so many different ways that a given organization can reach those customers. And then, of course, at the end of those sales channels, you've got the clients and the customers out there. But even beyond that, there's the brand followers, folks that might not yet be a customer or a client, but are aware of your brand and in some way do interact with your marketing. Those are people that you touch when your marketing reaches those folks. Even though they may not have actively participated in the supply chain, you are touching those people and you're reaching them. And that is part of the extended enterprise, and the learning function can actually help marketing reach those folks. And then in general, outside that is the public citizenship, all the way around that. just to give you an example of who some of these people might be as we talk, it's different for different organizations, different for different industries. So just as an example, in the public sector, who are we trying to reach? They're trying to reach the citizens. In healthcare, you've got the patients, but also the clinicians on the other end. Associations have their membership. Then you've got your finance and insurance companies. That's a unique industry as far as the way they're usually structured with that agent and brokerage structure, and so that creates quite a matrix of agencies outside of the main enterprise, and it's quite a vast extended enterprise when you get into those industries. Manufacturing, that's the most traditional looking supply chain with that, parts coming in and parts coming out as far as a supply chain, but typically, they're the end of their line is the resellers. And then in high tech, they're building solutions and software for their customers. So John, I was going to ask you what you thought about this. This is some Brandon Hall research that we just recently done, and we had asked organizations, your learning function, is it internal only, is it a combination of internal and external, or is it completely external only as far as who the audience is for the learning function? And you can see there it's relatively evenly split, that almost half of organizations have some sort of external facing learning. You can see that 53% just about are completely internal only, but on the other side of that, you've got that 35.7% that are doing both internal and external. And surprisingly to me, anyway, I thought was that we had 11.4% of organizations that do strictly external learning only. What's your impression of that, John? Does that match what you see in the market?
I'm seeing that little piece of the pie really accelerating from external only type solutions. I think what's happening is external learning, in our opinion, is probably the fastest growing segment of the learning technology, or the talent management space. And organizations, for example, like 2 or 3 years ago, we were seeing 1 out of every 4 or 1 out of every 5 RFPs come through that were externally facing, and now we're seeing literally 1 out of every 2 across 2012. And we review hundreds a year that are externally facing. And so, with that growing trend, what we find is that the external groups have been going to the internal departments, but finding that the set of requirements is different. When you're a revenue generator and you're facing out and people interacting with your system is on a volunteer basis, and you may be selling them content or providing them branded experiences, all those things are a somewhat different set of requirements than you see in internal LMSs. And because the scalability is so much greater, because even small organizations might touch hundreds of partners or millions of users, the scalability of the external systems seem to be greater than the internal. And so we're seeing a big trend of making that 11.4 a lot larger here over the last 12 months.
Yeah, and I see too, just to your point, that you've got this gap here between the two pieces, the two halves of the pie, if you will, and this line between doing it strictly internally and then doing some external learning. It's not an easy line to cross. I think so many people, when they are internally focused, it's very specific to the business and the organization, and it's not as simple as just simply opening the window and pushing the learning out to this other group. There are definitely a lot of considerations, and so we're going to talk about some of that as we move on. So that was just along the lines of the data collection that we've done around this. Just to give you an idea, as we were looking at different industries, you can see here some of the various industries that and how they came out in our survey as far as whether or not they're doing externally facing learning. And these are relatively broad industry groups. We didn't get down to specific industries. We wanted to keep the data set large enough. So again, this data is relatively broad, but you can see here aerospace transportation, at least 50% of those organizations have some form of external facing learning. Business and consulting services, clearly 72.2% are doing external. And I guess you can consider if you're doing consulting, that's what you're doing, is you're bringing learning outside of your organization and teaching other organizations how to do things. Again, high tech, telecommunications, healthcare, still up there. Here in the financial services, insurance, legal services, a little more tight around there with just over a quarter. And interestingly enough, hospitality and retail saying, as far as our data set anyway, that a very small percentage are doing external facing learning. But what we did want to find out, though, is we asked organizations what their learning priorities were for the coming 2 years. and we gave an extensive list of various learning priorities, whether it's developing a strategy, developing learning development, leadership development programs, transitioning technology, so forth. But one of the responses was, being able to deliver extended enterprise training. Is that a learning priority? And it was, for a good number of organizations, it was one of the top 2 learning function priorities over the next 2 years. And so you can see here how many of these different industries consider that to be a top priority. Now, this doesn't mean that these industries aren't doing it or aren't concerned about it, but the fact that, looking here at the government, that 12% say that reaching the extended enterprise is one of their top 2 priorities for the next 2 years. You can also see how important that is to the business consulting services group, as well as the that sort of advertising, media, entertainment, real estate group. So these are sort of gives you an idea that the idea of reaching the extended enterprise, it definitely has a different feel depending on which industry you happen to be in. And John, you and I have talked, and your own experience is that you've seen, especially in some of these industries, a little bit different interest in this topic, especially like in the hospitality retail industry, where there is actually quite a bit going on as far as delivering learning to franchises and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. We think anywhere where you don't have captured employees, so it works across restaurants, hotel chains, hospitality organizations, dealers, anywhere that you have this concept that people are franchising or they're not your employees, but they still need that same that same level of education, and you still want to have that same level of brand expectation no matter what Wendy's you go to, for example, or what McDonald's. We actually see a much higher percentage in that particular line item. But in general, when we first reviewed this, first started putting this presentation together a month ago and reviewing the data, this seemed light to us. Across all the different groups, we really see a higher acceleration as a learning priority for facing externally. So we delved through all the past RFPs that we've seen in the last 12 months, and we found that almost 50% of them were being driven by non-HR functions, but being driven by marketing or customer support or customer service. And we think that's probably some of the difference between the numbers that you see and we see, is that a lot of these are being driven by that operational side, and we think what it is because there's a direct line between the business and the return on investment. And so it's really easy to measure whether you have an increase in sales or a decrease in customer support calls, and that allows these initiatives to be self-funding and growing. As they continue to prove their success over time, they continue to expand it. So we think it's really accelerating off of these numbers.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something important there, where the typical survey pool, respondent pool for our study, they're going to be HR and mostly learning people, and they may not actually find external extended enterprise to be one of their priorities, but only because somewhere else in the organization it is a priority, whether it's marketing or sales, customer support, or what have you. It may be a number 1 priority over there, but within HR that might not even be really on their radar because they don't handle it. Yeah,
exactly.
All right. Well, what we wanted to do is for those folks out there that are actually doing this stuff. Let me get the poll up, and we wanted to find out maybe what the reason is behind delivering the learning to the extended enterprise. And I know, obviously, from our earlier poll that not everyone's doing this. So those folks that have an organization where they are delivering learning outside the walls, if you could go ahead and just pick out of these 5. And if you do have another reason, feel free to drop that into the question box and put that up there, and we'll see what kind of response we get there. We just wanted to put up as many as we could here and have people choose from them and see what the responses are. This looks about right. That we got over about 30% of the audience is responding, and that kind of sort of lines up to where we were as far as folks who are actually doing this stuff. So let's take a look. I'm going to go ahead and share these results, and I don't know if I'm surprised by this or not. Vast majority, it's all about generating revenue, which is something we're definitely going to talk about today. But you know, what do you think, John? Is that when you say you go back through those RFPs and you see a lot of folks who are, you know, looking for this as part of their solution from you guys? Is this what's bringing them to you? Are they looking to generate revenue, or is it something else?
Yeah, that's exactly it, and that's why this is such an exciting prospect inside our industry right now. It's for the first time we're really generating revenue versus being a cost center in HR. And so the excitement that's being founded on the operational side is that, lo and behold, education and certification and training drives revenue and generates revenue and helps develop cross-revenue across the organization. So in one flavor or another, just about any organization that's facing outside the organization is doing it for that goal. So that doesn't surprise me at all. It's very much what we see.
That's great. And so we are going to get into that in a little bit about the concept behind you know, using the learning function to generate revenue. So, you know, we talked about what the extended enterprise is, and you know, sort of what's going on, the lay of the land, what's happening out there as far as you know, where organizations are with doing this, and we've seen that in our own audience here today. You know, about the levels of where folks are with extended enterprise learning. Let's take a look at, you know, why are we even talking about this? And we just, you know, on that poll there, we could see some of the reasons behind those organizations that are already doing it, why they want to do it, and of course generating revenue is a big one, but there are those other reasons as well. And so what we want to look at here is one of the other data points that we have from the Brandon Hall Group study that we did is we also asked what are the top business priorities, not just the learning function priorities, but what is, you know, for your organization, what are your top business priorities right now? And here are the top 6. There were I think about 12 in the list, but these are the top 6. You know, you can see here, gaining market share, #1. Obviously, that's what folks want. Improving innovation, a perennial favorite. That's what organizations have been striving to do for the past decade or so. That's always up near the top. And, you know, delivering new products, cutting expenses is obviously important. But the thing is, the common thread here through these top 6 is that, done right, extended enterprise learning can impact each and every one of these things in one way or another. And what I want to do is we're going to take a walk through and see some of the ways that you can do that. And John's is kind enough to share with us some real-world examples of how organizations are meeting these priorities by delivering learning to the extended enterprise. So let's take a look at how extended enterprise learning can help with those business priorities. So let's look at a couple here, the gaining market share and expanding to emerging markets. Well, if you've got a knowledgeable sales channel, if you're delivering training and learning about your products down outside of the organization, and you're training those sales channels so they have the correct knowledge about the right products at the right time, they're completely up to date, and they have your messaging, they have increased selling power. That's going to increase the market share because they know they're better equipped to do their job, and they're just going to be better at selling and gaining that market share. You can expand into emerging markets using that supply chain. Your organization may not have a global footprint as it exists, but your supply chain may stretch across the globe. And so you may have manufacturers or suppliers that are located in different parts of the world. You may have customers or other sales channels in other parts of the world. So those connections exist, and they can be leveraged to help you know, set a footprint in that area and get a foothold and start to build a brand or a presence in those areas. And then, you know, greater exposure for all products and services. You know, just having that messaging out there, having your language and your learning that is, especially the learning that's focused on your products and services, it just, you know, it increases the exposure on both sides of the supply chain. The manufacturers and the suppliers, they know more about what it is you do and what you produce, and same thing with the sales channels and the customers, and then that sort of marketing target audience that we talked about. There's just more knowledge and more exposure out there for your products. And so what I want to do here is I'm going to have John walk through a case here where extended enterprises help meet some of these challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Healthcare in general is got to be one of the most prolific industries in external learning. Whether you're a pharmaceutical company or an actual healthcare system, hospitals, or you're worried about on a national basis of emergency responders, or you make software or for the medical industry, or you're an association that supports the medical industry, all of them are all targeting that same audience of healthcare workers of one sort or another to build their brand recognition and to expand their products and services. So we see a lot of activity across all those different facets here in healthcare. In this particular organization, we pulled this out because it shows a lot of trends that are hot right now and that are incorporated in a lot of external solutions. But this organization is a global pharmaceutical company that has businesses that are really focused on providing products and services around the area of diet and nutrition on a globalized basis. Their target audience is physicians and nurses and dietitians and nutritionists across the world in virtually every language, and they've got a lot of the same complexities of healthcare, of having CFR Part 21 compliance requirements, auditing trails, electronic signatures, things like that. But what they realized is that they're already touching some 75,000 of their audience on a daily basis through their natural channels. So providing them information already, or inviting them to conferences or things like that. So they've already established processes where they're interacting with their audience. And so versus creating a whole new learning management system where you'd send them into a new place, organizations are bringing parts of the learning management system into the portals that they're already supporting their clients with. So things like, because we know who they are in the portal, things like upcoming class schedules, locations, recommended training based on training that I've taken before. So bringing in these dynamic ways to cross-market and provide content right in the frame of how they're normally doing business. And as a result, they're really able to accelerate the value that they're providing this audience across the world, and do the exact things that you mentioned on the last page of expanding into new markets and increasing their cross-selling and increasing their supply chain, and doing that all as a part of the lens of the normal way they interact with their end users. So a real nice case study, we think, of reaching a global audience and doing it in a way where the LMS isn't a destination, but rather just a part of the way they do business.
Interesting. And so, we also have some of the other priorities that we looked at here, and we saw improving innovation and delivering new products and services, and those things are somewhat hand in hand. Obviously, they're separate, but you can take sort of the same road to reach these things. And part of that, when you've got a good relationship with the front end supply chain, the collaboration with suppliers and manufacturers, that definitely can aid in improving innovation and delivering new products and services. You've got a supply chain set of partners that know more about your organization, they know more about your products, they understand what it is that you do. They can be your partners in innovation and as well as creating new products. You'll know more about their capabilities, and of course, innovation is all about collaboration, and so being able to get ideas from outside the organization with partners that have a vested interest in what your organization does can help lead to innovation and new products as well. The same thing on the other end, better connection to customers to anticipate needs. So if you're delivering learning outside the enterprise, down that side of the supply chain, and you're reaching your customers, and you have you're building this relationship and this rapport, it can be, especially in this age of social media and the two-way web, you can now have feedback almost instantaneously back from your customers. And if you've got that relationship with them, you're more likely to get that type of feedback, and you'll better be able to anticipate the needs, and so sort of develop and design services that'll meet those needs. And then, of course, new opportunities to upsell. You've got your customers there, and by delivering learning and training on your products and whatever you have to that customer, you've created this relationship, and it doesn't have to end, once the sale is made. They've purchased your product and now it's over. By delivering the learning and the training that's associated with those products, you've now got these new opportunities to upsell those customers because you have this relationship with them. They haven't just completely walked away from you. And again, John's got some real-world experience with this, and he's going to give us another look at another case study.
If you're making products and you're supplying them on a global basis, either directly to your customers or through a distribution and reseller network, quite frankly, it's mandatory to have an external learning initiative or ongoing initiative to educate and make that connection between the end users that you described. Once you have somebody buying your product, it's critical that you continue to provide them service and upsell opportunities, but opportunities to fix their product, to troubleshoot it, to learn about it. All those things provide a competitive advantage in organizations. Where that's most clearly illustrated here in our client base recently is with one of our global aerospace organizations. on the very first slide, or one of the first slides, you saw that 50% of aerospace think it's a good idea to have external learning. The 50% that don't have it are really scrambling fast to get it right now. For example, imagine you make an aircraft, and for every aircraft line you have, there's a unique set of skills to service that aircraft, to repair it, to operate it, to fly it, to store it. All those things are different from aircraft to aircraft, though there is similarities. And so it's important that they provide the training and the education to make it easy for folks to get their certifications and maintain their certifications, and take as much of that training outside of the live instructor or live pilot version as possible to reduce the cost on that. And it behooves the organizations to, the more training and the more certified technicians and pilots that they have available in the industry at large, makes it all the more likely that they'll sell the next contract to a commercial organization buying a fleet of helicopters, or a public organization buying a fleet of airplanes. And so that whole connection between making it easy to stay current and certified and be educated on the products and services makes it easier for them to stay a customer and expand their customer, and then expand their customer relationship with you, and then more importantly to tell others and bring in that exponential effect. So this organization does exactly that, to provide the education across all the different touch points for their different aircraft, and do that all in a way that they can streamline their live instructor-led locations around the world, so people can earn and maintain their certifications in a cheaper and more cost-effective time frame. So a very, very common example we see across any manufacturing for that.
Right, and if you're delivering a product or a service that requires any sort of training whatsoever to use effectively, obviously flying a helicopter or maintaining a helicopter, it doesn't even have to be as complicated as flying a helicopter. Anything that you're delivering, that sort of product that will require some sort of training, somebody's going to deliver that training. So why shouldn't it be you? Who knows your products better than you? And you can sort of strengthen that relationship without the need for a third party to come in and sort of own that piece, where all the know-how already exists within the organization. There's no reason why it shouldn't continue on down the value chain.
Exactly.
And of course, the other perennial favorite as far as business priorities go is cutting expenses. So not only do we want to expand our market reach and grow revenues, but we're always looking for ways to cut expenses. And so we get back into that same thing as we saw before when we talk about relationships with the suppliers. If you've got this relationship built with the suppliers and the manufacturers by using the extended enterprise learning to reach out to that end of the supply chain, you're in a better position to negotiate costs and to work in ways that sort of leverage efficiencies that may not be available to someone who doesn't have that kind of relationship. For both ways, if they know more about your business and how you operate, it's easier to deliver the goods and services more effectively. And so that's one way to cut costs. The other thing is all these things as far as developing new products and having a knowledgeable